And it is time for more anime reviews. And yet again, I'm doing this recording because, well, things happened and I had to catch up late on all of my watching. So we're just going to get right into this and skip all of the pleasantries. So let's start with Shangri-La Frontier. Shangri-La Frontier's side arc has now played back in the main plot, with Rust revealing she knows something about one of the Colossi. Big shocker, I actually didn't expect that one. Sunraku's win against her was also a really good way to end the arc, and it doesn't play it off as like it's the last time that they're ever going to see the character, or that they're ever going to duel. It's still the same crazy antics as always, and I love it, and it portrays how good Sanraku's sense for people is with his negotiations with Rust over the information on the Colossi. And now he has another companion in the Rabbituzan Palace, which makes sense, but I don't quite know how to feel about that part. So all in all, a lot of good things did happen with this episode. Is it better than Blue Box? Not quite yet. So it's going to stay there. Next on the list is the Most Notorious Talker, and it actually had a really good episode this last week. I like how Noel was able to manipulate a bunch of people into clearing a path for him to reach his original objective of starting a clan. Again, his ruthless nature proves that he's driven and that he has no qualms doing what he needs to in order to achieve his dream of being among the regalia. I also like that it's being smart and manipulative about that pursuit instead of the usual shonen pursuit where the protagonist just trains a bunch. The dialogue delivery in this was great, the use of music was also interesting, and the bit of world building we've got was good. That said, I think I do want to move it up to the top of this category. Out of all the things I've watched and what I'm caught up on, I think it deserves that spot. Now here's going to be the interesting one. Dandadan. And honestly, I think I'm going to move it up over ReZero. And this is going to be a bit of a lengthy explanation, but I have a reason. The big part of it is that ReZero only did about half its run this season. And as much as I do like it, it was a really good run. Dandadan has been a more enjoyable experience, all things considered. ReZero did a lot of setup in its first half, and there hasn't been as much resolution with the plot as there has been with Dandadan. Both have fantastic characters that are very well developed, ReZero with its display of Subaru's progression particularly, and both have been visually satisfying, but Dandadan takes the cake by a country mile in that category. My point is, all in all, both were smash hits in my book. But Dandadan sailed just a little bit further before the end of its run, which, to be fair, is a bit because of the episode count difference. Still, ReZero puts you on a break before the major resolution to its core plot for this arc, which Dandadan has done a better job of delivering on stuff like that because it has that longer run. So, ReZero taking a break before hitting its climactic resolution to Arc 5 is really the deciding factor to me. If ReZero had continued running, it would have been no question. It's just the fact that there's this sort of blue ball moment where we don't get all of the resolution after 8 episodes. Let This Grieving Soul Retire has pretty much been a consistently okay series. It has its moments that I really do like, but I can't really say I'm very invested in its characters nor its story. Cry in particular is like a less fun version of Sid Kagano from The Eminence in Shadow. If Cry actually knew what was going on in these cases and was just trying to survive each one the best he could, I'd probably like this series more, but the fact that it paints him as an utterly incompetent person annoys me, and that's why I just can't get behind it no matter how much. Still, I like it more than the other ones, so I can't move it up, nor can I move it down. It's just going to have to stay where it is. And now we're moving back up to the top of the list to talk about Bleach. Bleach's latest episode was a good bit of character development, and what feels like the actual final bout between Mayuri and Pernita. The action was good, the music was great, but the one thing that's always felt weird to me about Bleach was this bizarre soul science that they like to get into that always feels like it's just complete nonsense to me. Effectively, it feels like it doesn't actually have a good basis in the story, and maybe that's just my perception. Still, it's not a tremendously negative element. It just something that slightly bothers me when it comes to this series. So I don't think it holds it back. It's not going down, but I also don't think I can move Bleach up above ReZero. I also finally caught up on Blue Box after a couple of weeks of not checking it out. My mistake. Firstly, for my comments, I feel like Chinatsu doesn't have much in the way of character development. Her core traits that make her stand out are hard work and empathy towards others. But that alone has been consistent for the whole series. She is consistently good-natured, well-meaning, and someone who is driven and doesn't let other people get to her too much. But that in and of itself has yet to really have any major payoff. I still like her as a character, but she's not as interesting as other characters in the series. Secondly, I expected Taiki to lose the tournament. That much was pretty much a given. But being such a short run of things was not on my radar. It makes sense. It helps show that there's a real challenge that he has to overcome, and it helps the stakes for the series. Plus, it's also a good show of sportsmanship between players that is a nice touch with other rivals and stuff helping each other out. In spite of being rivals, they all just want to up their game. So it's been really good. I just find it hard to believe that Chinatsu is supposed to be the main heroine when she's felt really flat so far. That said, I don't think it was better than Bleach, particularly because its main heroine, one of the characters who's supposed to be very well developed, doesn't feel like she's there yet. And then we get to 365 days to the wedding. This one seems to have swung all the way back around to the actual romance plot now, thank God. It was a good episode, and it pretty much played out exactly how I expected. Honjoji decided to take a day to try and prove how boring and unlovable she was, but Ohara ended up enjoying the day because he was glad to see her having fun for once, and that inspired them both to act on their feelings, and they ended up kissing. And that certainly was the high note for that episode. Now, I don't exactly like this whole subplot of someone stalking them from behind the scenes, knowing that they're not actually engaged. And that seems to be what the next episode will entail. It seems like this person has informed their boss. But this episode did good getting back to the part that I actually liked, and has pretty much confirmed that the two of them are in love with each other. And this was one of my favorite episodes yet. So, for that, I think I do want to move it up to very good. I enjoyed it. Next, we gotta talk about Dragon Ball Daima. Oops. It's now introduced a new quote-unquote Majin Buu type villain. Vegeta also got an action sequence finally, but it was kind of short and somewhat unimpressive, especially after the highs of last episode. Which that was one thing that was obviously going to be the case, since this is kind of an in-between episode, and they're winding down from the last high and getting ready for the next thing. It was a good setup for the final confrontation. We finally get to see what's actually being plotted with all of these moves that are being made. We now know most of what they're up against, but I would have liked for Vegeta to have joined the crew this episode instead of just meeting Goku and then parting ways again. That part felt very dumb. It felt like, oh, well, he's here, but haha, joke's on you, he's not actually gonna fight. That said, I can't really move this one around much. I don't have any, I feel like it's good at where it is. And now we can get to Loner Life in Another World, which has pretty much resolved the stampede how I imagined. It lacks shock value or the kind of storytelling I genuinely like. Stuff that takes things seriously enough to treat them like a threat and convince you that they are actual threats. If ever there was a junk food isekai, this would be one of them. Okay? It's satisfying to watch, but artistically speaking, not the greatest. And Angelica being completely mute this whole time feels like it's gonna get annoying unless she starts talking the next episode. So, yeah, this one's interesting, but just barely above the okay category. Tying the knot with an Amagami sister decided to play into a trope. And I do want to move it up, and I'll go through my reasoning here. This one, I'm jumping all the way to the top of interesting because that last episode was good. So, Uryu has now transferred into a formerly all-girls school, and he is the only guy there. Yuna also attends this school, and she doesn't want him to out the fact that they are living together because she thinks it's embarrassing. We also find out that Yuna has a little bit more to her name than you would expect. She's apparently one of the top students in the school, which, given how she's performed so far, not something I expected out of her. And finally, we have the scene where Uryu walks in on all the girls changing. Yeah, pretty tropey like that. It was a good episode. Again, we get to see the good and supportive sides of Uryu when it comes to like him deciding to make lunches for the girls and all that stuff, and just generally look out for them and have their best interest in mind. But on top of that, we also get to see Yuna playing nice as well after he makes her lunch, and she comes by to say thank you to him. And it's gotten back to some of the other characters and added a new one as well, like Yuna's friend, the class rep. And it also has pretty much officially introduced the romance aspect for Uryu's childhood friend, the silver-haired girl who was introduced earlier in the series. So yes, that one's moving way up because it had a really good episode. And now we get to one that I don't know what to make of this. Mecha Ude has a problem with the writing feeling roughshod because of its pacing. In trying to set up the stakes, it constantly makes it feel like nothing matters. Defeat an enemy, they come back later. Destroy a villain, they still somehow come back. Ultimately, it's just not a good series. The premise is great, but the delivery has been less than desirable. Many of the things it attempts are good in concept, but the rushed pacing, like I said, makes it all come off as an inability to properly transition from one plot point to the next. It feels like whoever wrote this didn't know how to properly bridge these gaps and just jammed everything together and made it as fast as possible because they didn't know how to fully explore their own concepts. So yeah, if I could move this one down into any other category, I would, but it's literally as low as it can go without me dropping it. It is just barely there because really, I only want to know how it ends. I'm not even like enjoying it anymore. I just want to know how it ends. And finally, we get around to You Are Miss Servant. And it was a good episode. It was a cute episode and one that actually I really enjoyed. Riko being walking chaos is just funny to me, but we also get to see more character development from both Hideyoshi and Yuki this episode. It's moving more to the romance aspect of it, which was something that was sort of like foreshadowed in a little bit of it, but now has been pretty fully put out in the open, which I like, and has kind of had the younger sister and others pushing the two of them together. I like that it's been exploring the family dynamic of both characters so far, and how they've basically just become important to each other because of that lack of familial bond. So, if I had to do anything with this, I'd move it up one. Because again, it was really good. But as for anime that I've watched, well, I'm still behind the ball. I need to catch up on Ranma. I need to catch up on Orb, Trillion Game, and Demon Lord 2099. In the meantime, please check out some of my other videos. I would appreciate it. Later.